Hello, I'm Darren Walker. I'm a black man wearing glasses with a blue blazer and blue shirt. And I'm president of the Ford Foundation. Today is a special day. We are releasing a book I wrote with some of the most forward-thinking voices across philanthropy, business, advocacy, and beyond. It's called From Generosity to Justice, a new gospel of wealth. For some time now, I've been thinking about how philanthropy can respond to the challenges we face as a world, in particular, the inequality around us. Andrew Carnegie's The Gospel of Wealth informed 20th century philanthropy and fundamentally altered how the world thought about giving. Now, our world has changed dramatically since then, even more so in the wake of the pandemic. There's no denying that we need new solutions. My book is an invitation to reimagine Carnegie's gospel for today, a set of ideas around how we can transform the old definitions of philanthropy and move beyond generosity towards justice. Together, in conversation with a dynamic new guard of leaders, we explore topics like capitalism, the healthcare system, institutional racism, and more. I'm excited to give you a sneak peek today and to introduce you to some of the people featured. But there are many more big ideas and brilliant leaders within the pages of this book, and I invite you to pick up a copy today and join the conversation. Now let's dive in deeper and meet some of the people featured. In my time at Ford, I've spoken a lot about capitalism, the good, the bad, and the unjust. And From Generosity to Justice, a new gospel of wealth, we talk a lot about what we can do to save capitalism from itself. The very idea of capitalism is a good idea, but it only works when it works for everyone. And thankfully, there are a growing number of business leaders finding ways to make our capitalist system fairer. And one of them is Nick Hanauer. A highly successful entrepreneur, Nick considers himself a proud and unapologetic capitalist who is also a leading critic of modern capitalism. In our conversation for the new gospel, he pushes us to end the kind of thinking that results in the rich only getting richer and the poor only getting poorer. Here he challenges old norms and offers 5 rules that will lead to a more equitable economy.
Nick Hanauer, a white man with dark hair, wearing a dark suit and white dress shirt.
Hello, everybody. So it has been said that you are what you eat. Maybe, but it is certainly true that a society is what it believes. And as a society, some of our most closely held economic beliefs, the beliefs that frame our politics, our policy, and our culture, are wrong, and worse, they're pretty terrible for us. We believed that the economy is an equilibrium system within which if one thing, like wages, goes up, another thing, like jobs, must come down. It's not true. The economy is an ecology, a complex, adaptive, increasing return system where when wages rise, for example, so do jobs. Believing that when wages grow, jobs shrink fundamentally mischaracterizes the economic dynamics in these systems in the same way as if you believed that when plants grew, animals shrink. This is not how the system works. There is no equilibrium in an economy. We believed that price equals value, and that people are always paid their marginal product exactly what they are worth. It's not true. Price sometimes equals value, but please take it from a successful capitalist. We never, ever pay people what they are worth. We pay them what they have the power to negotiate, and for sure, we never pay ourselves what we are worth. We pay ourselves as much as we can get away with. We believed that the availability of concentrated capital was the principal constraint on economic growth. It's not true. The economy isn't money, it's people. And the more people we fully include in the economy as innovators, entrepreneurs, well-paid and well-educated workers, and robust consumers, the faster and more prosperous the economy grows. Why does it matter that all these academic assumptions are wrong? Because they logically and inevitably lead to a higher level set of heuristics that has shredded our economy and our democracy over these last decades. Heuristics like raising wages kills jobs, tax cuts for the rich create growth, government is always inefficient, the market is a perfect meritocracy, greed is good, the rich are makers, the poor are takers, and there is always a trade-off between increasing amounts of economic fairness and justice and economic growth and efficiency. So here's the thing, there's a Nobel Prize in economics attached to every single one of those ideas, and they are all wrong. Because here's the thing, if you accept these neoliberal assumptions, the truth is there is only one economic outcome that is possible. The rich will get richer and everyone else will get poorer. Orthodox economics and neoliberalism have presented itself as science, as immutable, timeless truth. That is a lie. So how do we change our beliefs in a way that will lead to a more equitable society and more prosperity for all? The latest science suggests 5 rules of thumb. Rule 1, the market isn't a jungle, it's a garden. And tended like a garden, markets are the greatest social technology ever invented for solving human problems and creating prosperity, but unconstrained by social norms and democratic regulation, markets inevitably create more problems than they solve. Rule 2, economic inclusion is not this liberal luxury to be afforded if and when we have growth. Economic inclusion is the cause of growth in market economies. The economy is people. The more people we include in it, the better it works. Who'da thunk it? Rule 3, the sole purpose of the corporation is not to enrich shareholders, but rather to increase the welfare of all stakeholders, workers, customers, community, and shareholders alike. Rule 4, greed is not good. Being rapacious doesn't make you a capitalist. Being rapacious makes you a sociopath. And in an economy as dependent upon cooperation as ours, sociopathy is as bad for business as it is for the society. And finally, unlike the laws of physics, the laws of economics are largely a choice. So neoclassical economic theory has presented itself as immutable natural law when it is merely a collection of preferences, narratives, and social norms. If we want a more equitable, more just society, we need new economic beliefs. And here's the good news. If we want new economic beliefs, now we know that all we have to do is choose to have them. Thank you.
The economy isn't money, it's people. I couldn't say it better myself, Nick. He makes it clear we need to invest in people to invest in the economy. His 5 rules brilliantly reframe how we think about the future of our economy. Now, our next contributor, Ai-jen Poo, has been investing in people and building a kinder, more humane, more equitable economy for decades. A respected and incredibly admired leader within labor and workers' rights movements, she is the co-founder and president of the National Domestic Workers Alliance. Every day, Ai-jen goes out into the world to champion the voices of the people who make all other work possible. Caregivers, aides, and domestic workers, the invisible army that powers our economy. But their work is severely undervalued. Her definition of care, which she talks about in depth in the book, emphasizes the importance and interconnectedness of child care, elder care, long-term care, paid leave, and workers' rights. Because care connects us all. Here's a slice of some of I-Jen's work that shines a much-needed light on hidden labor.
I-Jen Poo, an Asian woman with dark hair tucked behind her ears, wearing a black satin wrap dress.
Oftentimes when we're looking for answers about the future, we go to centers of power and influence. Wall Street, Washington, D.C., Silicon Valley. One powerful thing I've learned through my work with domestic workers is that sometimes the answers about the future actually lie in the margins. In the margins and shadows of society, we can often find both the signals of what's to come for all of us and the solutions for the future. I work with the nannies who take care of our children, the house cleaners who maintain order in our chaotic homes, the home care workers who care for our aging loved ones and support our loved ones with disabilities. They do the work in our homes that makes everything else possible in the world. It powers everything, and yet it is some of the most invisible and undervalued work in our entire economy. The average wage of a home care worker, for example, is $15,000 per year. When I think about the conditions that define domestic work, unpredictable hours, piecing together work from lots of different gigs, no benefits, no career pathways, no access to a safety net or job security, these conditions define reality for more and more American workers every single day. That's why we call domestic workers the original gig economy workers. And these are some of the fastest growing occupations in our entire workforce today. As the older population grows and people live longer and millennials start having children, we need more caregivers than ever before. And unlike other segments of our workforce, these are jobs that can't be outsourced, and they're not going to be automated, at least anytime soon. They've been trying to build a robot to fold a towel in a lab in LA for 11 years and still have not been successful. These are without question going to be a large share of the jobs of the future. And the thing about justice-based philanthropy is it not only knows to look to the margins to see the future, it listens to the people at the margins for solutions. Domestic workers have been organizing for decades. They have broken out of the isolation and invisibility of working hidden behind closed doors in neighborhoods around the country to come together. We have developed a new vision for rights, domestic workers' bills of rights that have been passed in 9 states since 2010, to not only challenge the generations of exclusion from basic labor laws that have been subjected to this workforce, but to create a pathway to good jobs for the 21st century for this workforce. In the margins of our economy, domestic workers have been making a way out of no way. And this way, powered by justice-based philanthropy, has the potential to solve for the future of work, not just for domestic workers, but for all of us. Justice-based philanthropy knows to look everywhere for solutions, including the margins, especially the margins. In a charity model, I feel generous towards you, and so I give. Charity still implies a separation between you and me. A justice model draws a circle around us both, and it creates a we who are equally deserving of dignity, opportunity, and fairness. In a justice model, there are no victims or saviors, only survivors and leaders. We are all protagonists in this story, a roadmap for philanthropy that seeks justice everywhere, including at the margins, and invests in the people and the solutions it finds until the margins disappear.
iGen never ceases to inspire me. In the new gospel, we talk in more detail about how she's harnessing the energy, resilience, and lived experience of thousands of care workers to change the power dynamic for workers everywhere. It's a chapter that will leave you emboldened. Speaking of courage, our next speaker is an undeniable force in philanthropy. Dr. Elizabeth Alexander is the president of the Mellon Foundation, but also a talented artist, poet, and educator. At Mellon, she has leveraged the foundation to drive home the intersection of the humanities and social justice. And from generosity to justice, a new gospel of wealth, Elizabeth reminds us that the art of philanthropy is getting at the root of the issues facing society today. And that starts with understanding our own privilege to recognize the changes we need to make to tackle inequality in all its forms.
Elizabeth Alexander, a Black woman wearing a black dress and gold jewelry.
Let's take as a starting point that when there is an excess of wealth in one place, there is need in another place, and thus there is a moral obligation to share. That is a central justice principle of our work in philanthropy. And as a steward of immense resources moving outward with an eye toward making meaningful difference in the world, each philanthropy and its staff have an obligation to know the communities they work with deeply so that we can trust that glorious work is happening. For us to be able to be partners in a positive and rigorous way, thinking about how we learn from each other and how that is a value of our work, we have an obligation to staff properly with people who have real grassroots experience in fields. Those fields could be classrooms, small arts organizations, community activism, making art itself, and through their lived experience, walking through the world with a particular orientation and set of eyes on the world. I think that right now, what's really exciting is that there's a generation of philanthropic leaders with a different set of experiences, professional experiences, life experiences, and we're trying to bring some new tools to help people move through uncomfortable conversation and hopefully experience what I think is the real joy, the lifetime joy of doing work that has a justice orientation. That is joy that is sustainable. I know no other. The poet Lucille Clifton said, "I come to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable." I think this is not about wanting anyone to dwell in discomfort. Rather, I believe that if we trouble the water, we will move more inexorably in the direction of justice. I always ask myself, how can we be helpful in addition to the money that philanthropy has to offer to the empowered communities that we work with? What are the resources and insights and collaborations that we can offer? I think partnerships can be very fruitful if we remember with humbleness where our expertise lies, as well as what we are learning from the people that we work with. In addition to justice, I think that our work in philanthropy should explicitly have as a value freedom. I want us to add that to thinking about justice. And I think that freedom is something that I understand out of what the African American tradition has taught all of us about freedom, about what it is to be free and about what it is to be human, something we understand best from the experience of African Americans in this country in particular, denied both of those values, freedom and humanity. And so I understand the principle of freedom in the words of the poet Robert Hayden in his poem, Frederick Douglass, a poem dedicated to that great freedom fighter. He describes freedom thus: "We are visioning a world where none is lonely, none hunted, none alien." That is how Robert Hayden helps us understand freedom. What would it mean if none of us felt lonely or hunted or alone? And when we learn from each other and make ourselves stronger and make our communities stronger, a final word is something that I've learned from the poet Gwendolyn Brooks. I think that a way of embodying this justice principle is to think about what it means, in her words, to be each other's business. She says, we are each other's business. We are each other's magnitude and bond. And that's what I think justice and philanthropy is all about. Thank you.
We are each other's business, each other's magnitude and bond. That last quote from the great Gwendolyn Brooks really illustrates this idea of justice that we explore in From Generosity to Justice, a new gospel of wealth. How we are all responsible for one another and why we need to use our privilege to tackle inequality. Our next speaker, Jeff Raikes, is unafraid to address his privilege. The head of the Raikes Foundation and former CEO of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Jeff speaks candidly about his position, personally and professionally, in perpetuating inequality and what philanthropic leaders like himself can do to advance justice. And From Generosity to Justice, a new gospel of wealth, he talks in detail about how privilege is invisible to those who possess it. Are you ready to get uncomfortable? Jeff is here to help.
Jeff Raikes, a white man in his 60s with wavy gray hair and goatee, wearing a navy blue jacket with a rumpled pocket square.
This is a quick talk for white people. Now, let me explain. If we are to have an open and honest conversation in this country about racial justice that will lead to healing and inclusive prosperity, white people like me have a big role to play. And we cannot be coy about it. I needed to get over my fears of saying the wrong thing or saying the right thing in the wrong way and just jump in. And I still have a lot to learn. I am still guilty of centering white people, white perspective and expertise, white comfort as a first impulse. And I have to catch myself, stop, and remember that my experience is not the only one that matters. And I know that sounds painfully obvious, but when the world has been built to accommodate you, it's a hard habit to break. Privilege is invisible to those who possess it. And that lack of awareness undergirds the myth of colorblindness and leads to a sense of entitlement that is debilitating for society. So I am speaking out and sharing what I'm learning about white dominance and its invisibility to those of us who are white, and how that harms and distorts society in a way that creates a more steep uphill climb for people who don't look like me. Because once you recognize it, the myriad ways that we've created an obstacle course with setbacks and steep hills to climb for people who are not white, the more that we understand what we need to do. This has to change if our nation is to prosper. Now, like I said, the world has been built to accommodate guys like me. And the systems that support our young people are designed for my kids. But let's take a step back and let's think about the life of a black boy in this country. He is born to a mother who is less likely to receive high-quality prenatal care and more likely to die in childbirth. He lives in a household shrouded by the legacy of redlining and housing discrimination, preventing his ancestors from building the wealth that comes from owning a home and passing economic security on to children and grandchildren. He attends a public school that is financed by local property taxes, so he gets far less funding for his education than a child attending a public school in a wealthy neighborhood. His teachers, who are overwhelmingly white, carry the implicit biases that all of us carry. He is tagged as dangerous or angry from the time he is in preschool. He is suspended, expelled, and otherwise disciplined at a rate his white peers would never experience or tolerate. His teachers and administrators believe he can't be as successful as a white child, so he is tracked into less rigorous coursework that will make him far less likely to attend college. If he gets to college, he is far more likely to drop out because his public school didn't prepare him, and kids like him are not made to feel that they belong on a college campus. When he applies for a job, if his name sounds black, he is far more likely to end up in the reject pile. He is more likely to be a victim of violence, and he is far, far more likely to end up in the criminal justice system, either as a youth or an adult. He is more likely to be homeless. These are not outliers. These are data. These are facts. This is America. Unfortunately, when we see these outcomes that repeat and often worsen year after year, we as a culture tend to blame the victim and not tackle the system. We must change the life trajectory for the black boy I just described. And we don't do it by changing the boy. We do it by building systems that support his healthy development. Now, how do we do that? We design it for him. This is an idea that is gaining traction in policymaking. It works like this. Design the solution to the systemic problem you are trying to solve for the person who is least well served by the system you are trying to fix. Chances are, if you get it right for those who have suffered most, others will benefit too. That is the power of equity. Now, many of the systems, products, and infrastructure we all interact with, from public schools and courts to medicine and technology, were designed mostly by white men to work well for people like us. They were designed at a time when we had antiquated and destructive ideas about race, gender, identity, and disability. And they are holding us back. And they won't change unless people like me take our privilege and our power, share it, seed it, and transform it into a force for changing our society for the better. We must align and work toward a day when race and expressions of othering are no longer predictors of life outcomes for young people in our country. Can America reimagine itself as a society with equity as a transformative, animating force so that all individuals have what they need to achieve their potential and prosperity is more widely shared? Yes, this is what America can be. Thank you.
That was a welcome perspective from Jeff, and one that I'm sure was not easy to share. But this work requires getting honest with yourself and recognizing the realities of injustice. And no one knows that better than Ken Frazier, former CEO of Merck & Company, who has seen firsthand the inequities of the global healthcare system. And from generosity to justice, a new gospel of wealth. Ken's chapter delves into the implicit bias in healthcare, the disparities and quality of care, and how being seen and heard can make the difference between life and death. Here, renowned journalist Charles Blow joins Ken for an eye-opening discussion about maternal mortality for Black women in America, and Ken shares more of his personal experience.
Charles Blow, an African-American man wearing a gray suit and faded blue tie.
So let's start by talking about Black maternal mortality, which is something you care about.
Yep.
Black women, 3 or 4 times more likely to die during pregnancy or childbirth than white women or Hispanic women.
In New York City.
What are you doing at Merck to address that?
Kenneth Frazier, an African-American man wearing a gray suit with light blue pinstripes and a blue tie.
One of the greatest forms of injustice in our society are the health disparities. You know, in a company like ours, we celebrate all the new ways of treating and curing and hopefully preventing disease that come through sequencing the human genome. The reality of the world, though, is that your zip code is more determinative of your health outcomes and your life expectancy than your genetic code. So at Merck, what we've decided to do is we think it's a scandal that many women die in childbirth in New York City. Just to put it into context, the maternal mortality of Black women in New York City is worse than women in Mexico, and half the women in Mexico live below the poverty line. And so we have to say, what is it that we can do as a company that has a lot of brilliant scientists, focus on the practice of medicine to start to treat this differently? And there's a number of issues that drive this. There's the physiological stress of the lived experience of being a Black woman in America that puts them in a situation. There are issues around diet and nutrition, but also there are issues around how those women are heard when they go into the medical system, right? The best example of that, and you may have read about this, was Serena Williams. You know, she has all the money in the world, but she reports that I have this history, right? And I'm worried about a pulmonary embolism, and nobody listens to her. So our job is to see what we can do. We put $500 million into a fund to see what we could do to prevent women from dying unnecessarily in childbirth. No woman should die giving life.
This idea of being heard, it's very complicated. So how do we dig into that and bring equality to that space? Because a lot of it is operating as a subconscious bias, not as an active hatred or animus to the Black people.
Sure, and that's one of the challenges in our society is that we don't see people who are expressing, well, we see too many of them nowadays. We used to not see people who are expressing animus, but there is this question of whether people can be heard. So it's really a question of training and sensitivity and awareness. And that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to help physicians understand certain things that are endemic to these African-American women. So for example, the rate of high blood pressure is much different in African-American women. So whether they show up, raising that as a risk factor or not, you ought to understand that. And you really ought to, be much more patient in listening to the story about what's happening to a person. I just have to say, my wife actually had a brain hemorrhage when my first child was born.
Wow.
Now, if you're going to have a brain hemorrhage, you should probably have it in the hospital at the University of Pennsylvania, one of the better places in the world to do it. But the fact of the matter, she kept saying, I'm having these pounding headaches. And they kept saying, no, you're having postpartum stress. And if it wasn't for her having a female anesthesiologist who was troubled, calling her husband, a doctor in another hospital, who immediately diagnosed it as a subarachnoid hemorrhage. So I saw it in my own life. So this is a question of who gets heard.
Is part of the solution encouraging more young African-American students to go into the medical field?
Absolutely. So for that reason and other reasons, it's important that we have in all the professions that are important to our society, law, business, medicine for sure. We treat humanity in all its infinite variety. If we don't have people who actually represent the patients, I don't know how we can actually have a just and effective medical system.
And is there any concern about the siloing of medicine, meaning that you are more likely to get a good outcome if you visit a doctor who is sensitive to you because they look like you, they have the same life experience as you? Do you worry at all that becomes the norm, that I am now doctor surfing to find a Black doctor because I'm Black, I'm doctor surfing to find a Hispanic doctor because I'm Hispanic? Or do you think that just by having more people in the space that it equalizes it and brings everybody up to a level?
I think it's a question of having more people in their formative years and in the educational system. I don't want to live in a world where I think that I need to have a Black doctor, right? I think it's a question of making sure that physicians, no matter what their color, are or listening to the conversations that their patients are having. These are issues for women, by the way, irrespective of color. It's the same kind of issue, and we've just got to train physicians to be much more open and much more willing to listen to what's happening in front of them.
Ken shows us how business can begin to play a more significant role in uprooting injustice. Only when every person, every sector does their part will we start to see real, material change. And that's the idea behind this book and the series of conversations. We are asking everyone who has the means or the influence to commit to changing the circumstances that create the need for charity in the first place. We are asking, what if we moved beyond generosity and towards justice? Thank you for joining us today for this conversation about philanthropy and justice. Let this only be the start of a larger, ongoing dialogue between all of us, funders, advocates, business leaders in government, and individuals. Because changing the way the world tackles inequality will take all of us. I invite you to pick up a copy of From Generosity to Justice, A New Gospel of Wealth, available wherever books and audiobooks are sold, and explore further some of these issues and perspectives. All proceeds from the book will support social justice organizations fighting for equality around the globe. At the Ford Foundation, we believe it's time to reimagine philanthropy. It will take all of us, and we hope you will join us.